Well, Prime Minister Modi addressed the World Economic Forum. He's also had a meeting with Indian business leaders as well as global business leaders and a bilateral with Justin Trudeau. Joining us now to talk about what he made of the Prime Minister's speech and other pressing issues is Uday Kotak. Mr. Kotak, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. While we wait for the choppers to fly by, let me start by asking you about what you made of the Prime Minister's message. Mr. Jaitley tweeting saying that he's told the India story on a global platform very convincingly and that he's also risen to the occasion as a global statesman. What's your own point of view?
I think it was an awesome speech by a statesman of global stature. And the three themes around climate change, terrorism and protectionism are really the key issues in the world. And what better place than the World Economic Forum, which has been focused on these issues. And for the Prime Minister to say that India is going to play a very significant catalytic role in all these areas is also the sign of a statesman who effectively marketed the India story and at the same time rose to the level of a global statesman.
But, you know, he spoke about globalization, he spoke about protectionism and the challenge of protectionism, he spoke about India being an open economy. You know, there are several things there that would have caught the attention of global investors and domestic investors. What was the single biggest highlight to your mind for you?
The biggest highlight for me was the speech on protectionism and saying that the world needs to be open. And at the same time saying that India will be open, but India knows how to take care of its interests. So a message which says we are open for business, but we will do what's right for India.
I would imagine that echoes a little bit of what you've been saying as well, because you very recently stated that, you know, a lot of Indian jewels are now foreign owned, and in fact, foreign savers are benefiting from these companies. You said that the policy framework, while it needs to encourage foreign direct investment, also must ensure that we have significantly strong Indian homegrown companies. What do you mean?
No, what I mean is, first of all, I'm not saying we protect Indian businesses. That's not the core of what I'm saying. But we must be clear what we are doing. If we say that in the case of an Indian bank, you have majority foreign ownership, in the world where you are aware that global proxy advisors like Glass Lewis and ISS effectively have a disproportionate share how global institutions vote. Therefore, if majority ownership is, maybe even if it is widespread, the two decision makers or influencers are two global proxy advisors. Therefore, we should not fool ourselves that the decision making effectively has got much more centralized effectively in the hands of global proxy advisors, irrespective of individual holding in companies.
So if I may pick up on what Mr. Mundra, the former RBI Deputy Governor, said, and we quoted you to him and asked him what he made of that comment, and he said that in his experience, this wasn't such a big problem, or it wasn't a problem at all.
It is like saying, why do we insure our house? Why do we insure life? Then we should not be insuring at all. The insurance industry should be dead and gone long ago.
So foreign direct investment, 100%, if at all, for the banking sector. We don't know if it's going to happen or not.
I think
you believe that that is a complete
You've got to divide it into two parts, okay? One is if foreign banks want to set up wholly owned Indian subsidiaries. I think that's a separate policy, and that is different, and I think that should be fine within the framework of reciprocity and everything else. But to say that we call ourselves Indian private sector banks, and then we say that, okay, 100% foreign ownership is okay, but we are Indian private sector banks. That's not on.
Okay. Let me ask you about another issue that you've been talking about, and that is the possibility of a bubble in some of the small cap and mid cap companies. Today, the Sensex is 36,000. So, you know, the market continues to rally irrespective of concerns on valuations and so on and so forth. What is getting you worried at this point in time?
First of all, money makes the world go round. So whether it's global money, which is seeming to be opening the new year with a bang, so we're seeing a positive sign on that. Combine that with the fact that for the first time, many first-time investors have come into mutual funds in hordes. At a time when, thanks to demonetization and GST, we have seen money move away from real savings in terms of real estate and gold into financial savings. So these are newcomers. They are putting money into funds and unit-linked policies and stuff like that. they have not experienced any volatility because they have no history.
So are we in the midst of a bubble in that space?
I don't think we are in the midst of a bubble. What I've said is that we risk a bubble if continuing large amounts of money, which on a broad funnel come into a small pipe of a few hundred stocks, and particularly in small and mid cap, where we also have questions about the levels of governance.
But what can you do if the money is going in? I mean, who's to stop it?
So I agree, but the question is, we should be clear that when things go wrong, investors and savers, and then you will have investigations and everything, blaming the system. We have to be aware about the risk.
But it's not just India, globally as well. I mean, you know, whether it's the equity markets or other asset classes, we've seen a significant move up. And that is worrying some people like yourselves to suggest that maybe this overconfidence is a symptom of the fact that things are overdone.
Shereen, against that, I think you got to look at the fundamentals. I think the US, for example, lower tax rate means dramatically higher earnings. At the same time, I think the India story is getting better. I see the pain of demonetization and GST behind us. That the fundamental structural story of India is getting better. And that needs to reflect in fair valuation. Now, what is fair valuation? Say large cap, mid cap, small cap, is a matter of judgment and opinion. And that is where I think we have to be clear that especially first-time savers, we got to nurture them and make this into a structural, long-term bull market rather than a hit and run.
Okay. Let me then ask you, sir, about your own plans to bring down your stake in the bank. And you have till December of 2018. What's the most viable option?
So we are evaluating various options. So at an appropriate time, we will communicate.
Consolidation?
At this point of time, we are evaluating various options, and I'm not in a position to comment on any specific one.
I want to ask you about specifics, but do you believe that 2018 could be the year where you could...
You're asking me what I've just replied.
No, you just said that you're looking at various options. I'm saying, do you believe that 2018 could be the year?
Various options means various options of whatever are the possible options for us as a bank to look at.
What do you make of the consolidation that we're seeing within the banking and the NBFC space?
I think these are all positive signs. And I have always been a believer that over time, I think stronger entities, more productive entities is the way to go. That does not mean I'm giving any signal on any of the options. And I don't want any misunderstanding at all.
Got that. So finally, let me ask you, sir, do you believe that it's in terms of the economy, things are looking stronger today, and do you see a revival as far as
we are clearly seeing a pickup in loan growth. If you noticed our December results, we have grown our loans at 23%. We are seeing our earnings growth. We grew at 28% for the December quarter. So we are seeing things come back, and we feel pretty good about the state of the financial sector, particularly our positioning. And we think this is a significant structural opportunity for players in Indian financial services.
Mr. Kotak, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much for joining us on CNBC-TV18.